All right, let's talk about the electron transport chain and chemoosmosis. So this is the most important part of cellular respiration. This is where we're going to produce most of the ATP, especially if we're talking about eukaryotic cells. All right, so this electron transport chain is going to occur in the mitochondria. So we remember we just did the citric acid cycle, and which takes place in the matrix, right? That very innermost portion. We recall that mitochondria have two phospholipid bilayers. The matrix is the inside of the interior membrane. The electron transport chain are proteins that are embedded in that inner membrane of the mitochondria. All right, so let's get into it. So before we can talk about the electron transport chain, we have to talk about this big crazy family picture. So when my husband and I first started dating, that first Christmas, we took all my kids down to Tucson, and there just happened to be the one rare event that all the grandkids and all the kids happened to be in Tucson. And so we had about, I think it was like almost 25 people in this really small house. It was very loud, it was very chaotic. And it was a great opportunity for everybody to get to meet each other. Now, what I want to draw your attention to is our boy Miles here. Miles is about 15 years younger than all the rest of his cousins. He was adopted when he was about a year old. So there's a big age gap. And so when we get together as a family, Miles wants to play and play and play and play and play. Whereas all the other cousins are like adults now. And so they're like, playing board games or Dungeons and Dragons or, whatever. And they're not wanting to wrestle with a high energy kid. So what ends up happening is because we have to do something with this high energy kid, is that he gets passed from uncle to uncle. And when the one uncle gets tired, he gets to go to transfer to the other one. And then that one gets tired. And so then we transfer him. So John gets a turn, and Scott gets a turn, and Mike gets a turn, and everybody has a turn with the high energy Miles until eventually they're all tired and we give them to the cousin, right? So Cyrus, I think, just turned 18 this year. And so after all the uncles are done, Cyrus is ready to play with Miles. And then after Cyrus is done with Miles, Miles is finally tired out. Okay, so we use this as an analogy um, for the electron transport chain because those high energy electrons that we've been taking from the glucose molecule as we've been deconstructing it, those high energy electrons are going to get passed from protein to protein in this electron transport chain and eventually get end up with a oxygen and some hydrogen and create water. Okay. And that's why we're talking about aerobic respiration, is because we need this oxygen. Without this oxygen, as the final electron receptor, those electrons don't have anywhere else to go. Okay. And for most organisms, this electron transport chain is the most efficient mechanism at producing ATP. Okay. So aerobic respiration is where it's at. Okay, so let's have a little look at what's going on in this inner membrane of the mitochondria. Okay, so here's our phospholipid bilayers. Um, and so on this little diagram, this side is the matrix of the mitochondria, right, where the citric acid cycle is taking place. And then on this side is the space in between the two plasma membranes. So we're going to call that the intermembrane space. Okay. So these high energy electrons are coming in from our NADH, right? We've been just putting them in our nasty little pockets, those high energy electrons. And so first we take it to Uncle Scott. So here, Uncle Scott, here's a high energy Miles. Okay. And when Scott's done, he transfers high energy Miles to the next protein. And that is going to, as we're doing that transfer, in order to do that transfer, a hydrogen ion that is in the matrix has to be transported into the intermembrane space. So we're taking them from here, and we're shoving them over there. Okay, and we keep doing that. Okay, we transfer that high energy electron, and we transfer that high energy electron, and we're pushing hydrogen through. We're pushing hydrogen through. Okay, and what we're doing is we're building up a high concentration of hydrogen ions in the intermembrane space. So there's a lot of hydrogen ions over here, but not a lot in the matrix. Okay? Until eventually we give those high energy electrons, whoop, to our oxygen and some hydrogens to produce water. So if you are wearing glasses and are like me and have a cold and have to wear a mask, you're going to fog up your glasses from all that water that you're producing doing cell respiration. Okay, so there's our final electron receptor. Okay, that's producing that. But let's talk about this protein here. Okay, so this protein its name is ATP synthase. So here it is. That is one that you are probably going to want to remember. Okay, so because we have this high concentration in the intermembrane space, so between the membranes of the mitochondria, they want to get from this high concentration to a lower concentration, right? They want to travel back across this matrix. But because these are charged particles, they can't get past these hydrophobic fatty acid tails. They're getting repelled. They're like, mm-mm. So they need a protein that is going to allow them to pass from one side of the membrane to the other. And so we have this ATP synthase. There's a little channel in here where all these little hydrogen ions or these protons can slide through. And because these are positively charged, there's a mechanism that is going to cause this portion of that protein to rotate. And we're going to take that kinetic energy, right, that movement, and we're going to transfer that kinetic energy into chemical energy. We're going to take our ADP that have two phosphates and a phosphate group that's floating around, and we're going to produce ATP where we have those three phosphates. Yes, that's what we came here for, was to make ATP. Woo! Okay. And so if we look at this, this enzyme, right, this protein that's going to catalyze the chemical reaction, right, going from ADP to ATP. It looks an awful lot like the turbines that we see in Glen Canyon Dam. So in the dam, the water is going to flow across this area, cause that turbine to spin, and we can take that kinetic energy and turn it into electric energy that powers our lights and our air conditioners and our computers and our phone chargers and all the things that we need to do in our lives. And say it's very similar structure because we have a very similar function, right? We're taking this, this is rotating, the stock is rotating, and that's going to allow us to transfer that kinetic energy into chemical energy to produce ATP. Now, enzymes have that last name of A's, and their first name usually gives us a clue about what it does. So ATP synthase is going to be the enzyme that synthesizes ATP.